Well, it's time to switch over and talk about the defense in our position preview series. Let's lead off the defense by talking about the D-line. What's going on, Mountaineer Nation? Welcome back into the Country Roads webcast as we continue our position preview series. We've wrapped up the offense. Be sure to go back, check out all the videos that we did previewing each position on the offense if you haven't had a chance to do so. Now we're switching gears. We're heading over to the defensive side. Fall camp's underway. We still have some question marks on the roster, but we are still going to highlight a few of those guys here when we talk about the defense. Mainly one here when we talk about the defensive line. That's eligibility remains up in the air, but hopefully we'll have some answers on that here in the near future. So we'll go through the defensive line as a whole. Then we'll break it down, give my projected pecking order at each position there, the D end, the D tackle, and the nose tackle. Kind of break it down that way. I did a 3 deep at each spot, the kind of way I see it shaking out, and we'll see how that lines up come Saturdays here later this month. Hard to believe West Virginia plays football this month, but it's coming, and we got to talk about these positions on the defensive side before we get there. So we're going to kick it off with the defensive line. But before we get into it, just a quick reminder, if you would, take a second, hit that thumbs up button, help us out with that crazy YouTube algorithm, help us find more Mountaineer football fans like yourself. And if you're one of those that hasn't yet, be sure hit that subscribe button, get these videos directly into your feed. We've got our position preview series up and rolling. We just dropped our season prediction roundtable to kick off season 8 of the CRW podcast. So a ton of good content here. If you just hit that subscribe button, you'll get it directly into your feed here on YouTube. And of course, throw your thoughts in the comments of how you see the defensive line pecking order shaking out as you watch this video and see my projected pecking order towards the end. I'd love to hear yours as well. Appreciate those interactions. Throw them there in the comments. And with no further ado, let's talk defensive line. All right, so first things first, here is a look at the group as a whole. As we get set to head into the 2025 season, these are the defensive linemen that are on the roster. We'll go through and kind of highlight each one of them, but this gives you a look at the room as a whole, how many defensive linemen are on the roster. Good mix of upperclassmen and younger guys there as well. It's a nearly 50-50 split between juniors and seniors, and then sophomores and freshmen or redshirt freshmen. So you got some guys there that can help contribute in the future to go along with the guys that you brought in that'll help you right away this season. We're going to run through it, starting with the redshirt seniors, going all the way down to the freshmen, and then I'll give you guys my projected pecking order. So let's talk about some of these guys. And we lead it off with Edward Renan, a.k.a. Eddie V, a.k.a. as I like to always call him here on the CRW, Steady Eddie, because he's just been Mr. Consistent throughout his career here at West Virginia. Hated that he dealt with that injury last year that held him out, because the year prior when I was going through doing player grades each week, he was one that consistently popped up in the top 5 highest graded players on defense, just a guy that always did his job. So we hate the fact that he got injured last season, but we love the fact that we have him around for one more season this year. And like I said, I expect him to be solid, expect him to be a solid contributor along that defensive line here for his final season. Academic all-conference last year despite dealing with an injury. And then, of course, in 2023, he was also academic all-Big 12 first conference, and then he was all-Big 12 honorable mention as well there by the coaches. Started all 13 games at D-tackle back in 2023. So certainly he's going to be in the mix competing for that starting job. Yet again, probably one of his best games, I would say, was in the Duke's Mayo Bowl, where he had a TFL and a half and a sack in that game to go along with 6 tackles. And he's a guy that can be disruptive at times, but more or less, he's what I love about him is the consistency. That's why I call him Steady Eddie. He doesn't make a ton of mistakes, so we're happy to have Eddie V back for his final season at WVU. All right, next up, we can talk about the elephant in the room here, and that's Jamory Robinson's eligibility or lack thereof currently. Him and the other 3 Mountaineers that are concerned about their eligibility for the upcoming season have filed a lawsuit against the NCAA seeking an injunction to be able to play this upcoming season. And I think all of those guys would be impactful, and having them on the roster is going to, make a big difference. But I think the one that, of course, is the most impactful is definitely Jamory Robinson. He is the one that we really could use this upcoming season. Not to say that we can't use the others, but to me, Jamory Robinson is almost like a generational type player. That's what you're getting with this pass rusher that's coming over from UTSA potentially to WVU. Fingers crossed we get to see him this year. I believe he's the most ready-made pass rusher that West Virginia's brought in terms of being able to attack the passer, being able to get sacks since, a guy like a Bruce Irvin. That's what type of player you're bringing in here with Jamory Robinson, and he's proven he can do it at this level. Not quite at the power conference level yet, but last year he was an absolute monster at UTSA. We're talking about a guy that was the conference player of the year there in the conference, on the defensive side. So you're getting a player of the year, a defensive player of the year in Jamory Robinson. Played a little bit more of an outside linebacker role at UTSA. He's listed as a defensive end here at WVU, although I still wouldn't rule out him maybe lining up in the bandit role at times. I think all in all, he'll be a defensive end if we get to see him. We're going to wait and see, hopefully learn about that eligibility in the near future, but we definitely need him here on this roster. Multiple TFLs in 6 games last year. He ended up with 10.5 sacks and 17 TFLs to go along with 2 forced fumbles there at UTSA last season, which, of course, like we said, led to him being the conference defensive player of the year there, which is extremely impressive. And you can't say enough good things about Jamory Robinson. And you guys are going to absolutely love this guy. If he gets on the field for WVU this season, he's going to be an absolute playmaker, a game changer on the West Virginia defense. Talk about guys that are mainstays and guys that are consistent. What you like here when we continue to talk redshirt seniors is we now have another one that's been here throughout his entire career, essentially. Hammond Russell, the fourth, 6'3", 312 pounds, likely to be your starting nose tackle this season, certainly competing there. He has some competition we'll talk about when we get to the projected pecking order. But Hammond Russell, that's what you love. It's just so rare today's day and age to see a guy stay at one school throughout his entire career. He's done that. He's continued to move up the ladder to where he was a consistent contributor last year, and now this year could really carve out a huge role for himself in this defense, playing that nose tackle spot. You love those big guys up front that clog up the holes there at that nose tackle spot. And Hammond Russell has done a great job of that. I think he'll continue to do a great job of that here in his final season at WVU. Last year, he played in over 300 defensive plays, including nearly 40 against Cincinnati. Finished the year with 17 tackles, 3 sacks, and 3.5 TFLs. Not bad numbers, sacks and TFL-wise, for the position that he plays there at the nose tackle spot. So I think he could be set for a big final season here at WVU. A guy that sat around, kind of waited his turn, didn't play a lot early in his career, but continued to play more and more as his career went on, and now to the point where he can be a key contributor, a key cog in this defense in his final season in Morgantown. And we round out the redshirt seniors here by talking about another transfer that West Virginia brought in that is a redshirt senior in Devin Grant. He's coming from Incarnate Word, but actually has some experience playing at the power conference level as well, as he spent time at Colorado to begin his career there. He was there from 2020 to 2022. And even in 2022, as a redshirt freshman, he was a guy that played in multiple games. So, you're getting on the field as a redshirt freshman in a power conference, you're a pretty good player. And I think he was highly regarded coming out of high school. That redshirt freshman season at Colorado, he had 15 tackles, 2 TFLs there in the minimal games that he played there. I think he played in 9 or 10 games. So not too bad to have 2 TFLs there. But then of course, when he went to Incarnate Word is when we really saw what he can do as a pass rusher. Had a couple of great seasons there at Incarnate Word where, he kind of was oversized linebacker, you could say, for Devin Grant, 6'2", 265, big linebacker. So similar to what we talked about with Jamory Robinson, kind of played more of a linebacker role at Incarnate Word. Here, he'll be a hand in the dirt, defensive end type of guy, but really a solid player that West Virginia added late in the process. And, I think the silver lining here, we want Jamory Robinson because he's a game changer. But if not, the good thing is I think West Virginia has enough other good pass rushers to pick up the slack. And one of those that would pick up a lot of that slack, I think, would be Devin Grant, who, we talked about his time in Incarnate Word there. He was an all-conference player. He tied for 5th in the conference with 8.5 sacks, also added 11 TFLs and a forced fumble this past season. So, there's some of the things that he can do as a pass rusher, and good size to go along with it so he can hold up against the run. So I really do like the pickup of Devin Grant coming over from Incarnate Word to play for the Mountaineers for his final year. And then we have one of West Virginia's transfers from the SEC coming over. He's not a redshirt senior, but he is a senior, and he will be making an impact this year on that defense. You can guarantee it. I mean, you can see pictures and videos that have been coming out from practice, and when you see number 1 out there on the defensive line, he just stands out. He looks different. He has great size and the athleticism and the speed, the ball get off he has to go along with that size. Super impressive. So Eddie Kelly Jr., 6'5", 288, coming over from Missouri, where he was a contributor there for the Tigers, will finish out his final years here at WVU. And we talked about, an SEC transfer. We had a lot of them on the offensive line. Got one on the defensive line here as well. had 9 career starts during his time there at Mizzou, played in over 37 career games, compiled 77 tackles, 2.5 sacks, 11 TFLs, 5 pass breakups, 1 fumble recovery, and 3 quarterback pressures. Had 30 games where he had at least 1 tackle and 12 contests with 3+ tackles. So, he's been a mainstay at Mizzou. I think kind of similar to kind of what we talked about with Hammond Russell, a guy that stuck around there, waited his time, finally got some extensive action last year, made some things happen when he was on the field, and parlayed that into, moving on and hitting the portal to where he's now going to be a starter at another power conference program here. I do believe he has a great chance to start here at WVU, and certainly he's going to be someone that makes a difference on that defensive line. I think his role could even expand further and, require him to play a little bit more D-end than D-tackle maybe if Jamory Robinson isn't eligible. We'll talk about that momentarily when we talk about the pecking order here, but he's someone you're going to see on the field a lot. Look out for number 1, Eddie Kelly, the Missouri transfer here on the WVU defensive line. Now let's move into talking about some of the juniors. We've got redshirt junior, Asani Redwood, who came in with a lot of hype, especially by, some of us here at the CRW. My guy Brad really loved Asani Redwood, and rightfully so, because I was blown away by the sack numbers that he put up in high school as well. He's new to the position. He's really grown into it. Now 6'3", 296, and, he's learned the position even more, learned kind of the fundamentals, and I think he's going to be a solid contributor over his final couple of seasons, especially if he can reach that form that he had in high school and start to pressure the quarterback like he did back then. That would be super, super impressive. Hasn't played a ton yet at the collegiate level. Last year, played in 13 games, did end up with 1 start. He had 8 unassisted tackles, 1 sack, 2.5 TFLs, and 2 pass breakups. But what really impresses you is when you go look at the high school numbers. He was an All-American by Max Preps, All-State first team, All-Regional in the 8A division there where he played at in Georgia, I do believe, All-County first team honors. But look at these numbers. In high school, 23.5 sacks and 39 TFLs. His 17 sacks, let me say that one more time, 17 sacks set the school season record in high school. So those were the numbers that came in and you were like, oh man, this guy's going to really be something special. And I still think he has that capability. He's had to deal with the injury bug a couple of times, and that's probably put him off course a little bit. But you definitely see the potential. You see the ceiling there for Asani Redwood to not only be a mainstay on the defensive line, but maybe wreak some havoc here in those final years in Morgantown. And then we have another redshirt junior, this one new to the program, coming over from the JUCO ranks there at Garden City Community College, and that's Elijah Simmons, listed 6 foot 288 on the defensive line. That size kind of reminds me a little bit of TJ Jackson from last year. And I think Elijah Simmons can be a contributor. We'll see how quickly he can acclimate and become a contributor right away. But he was, decently regarded coming out of high school. He ended up at Kent State before heading to Garden City this past year for his sophomore season, where, of course, he was on the D-line there, appeared in 11 games, finished the season with 21 tackles, 1 sack, 5.5 tackles for a loss, a forced fumble, and a fumble recovery. So, he was wreaking some havoc there in the backfield at the junior college ranks. We'll see if he can now do it at the power conference level. West Virginia's hoping to mold him into a player throughout his career at WVU as he now joins the roster as a redshirt junior. And then we have Jackson Biser, 6'2", 236 redshirt junior, in-state guy, kind of worked his way, up the ladder, so to speak, former walk-on, similar to the path his brother followed, right? Caden Biser was a walk-on, ended up earning a scholarship and is contributing, got some snaps there at the linebacker position. Jackson Biser hasn't worked his way to get some snaps yet on the defensive line, but we know that that's something that he's working towards, and maybe in the future he'll be able to do the same as well. Certainly is another body that you have there on the defensive line that's going to help you scout team, leading up into games, help you if you need, depth purposes, knock on wood, the injury bug would pop up. He's certainly someone that has that hard edge mentality, and we're glad to have Jackson Biser as a part of this defensive line for his redshirt junior year. And then the last junior we have to talk about is someone else that's new to the program, just coming in from Cerritos College there. Another junior college pickup in Adam Tomch, 6'3", 261. I like Adam Tomch's game. You watch him on tape, you look like, okay, this is someone that could potentially maybe make something happen throughout his, couple of years that he has left here to spend at WVU as he makes that jump up and out to the power conference level. Began his career at Utah State before going there to Cerritos College, where he played defensive end there, and he was all-state first team. Played in 9 games, finished with 43 tackles, 16 of those being solo, 4 sacks, 9 TFLs, 2 forced fumbles, 1 fumble recovery, and a pass breakup. So some good numbers there. One of his best games was against Long Beach City, where he had a sack and a half and 3 TFLs. I love the TFL numbers. They're 9 TFLs, pretty good. He played in 9 games, had 9 TFLs. That's averaging 1 TFL per game. If he's able to do that at the power conference level, we'll take that any day of the week. If he can rack up TFLs, he'll earn him a spot on this defense, and we'll see where he ends up in the rotation, but someone that I think could very much work his way up into that rotation. So we'll keep an eye on Adam Tomch, new to the program this season as well. And then we've got a couple of sophomores to highlight here that, despite being younger, I think could be contributors to this defensive line starting this season and then really continuing moving forward. These guys have an extremely high ceiling. And one of those that we have to talk about is Cory McIntyre Jr., 6'3", 284, now a redshirt sophomore. And this is a guy which obviously has the pedigree. You guys remember Cory McIntyre Sr. His dad was a longtime starting fullback in the NFL. So, Cory McIntyre Jr. flips it over, plays the other side, plays defense. But this is a guy that was so impressive that when he came in since his his true freshman season, he was going to play on the defensive line. And then last year as a redshirt freshman, he was probably going to start on the defensive line, but both years had to deal with some injury issues and, of course, kind of kept him out. We just have to hope that he's fully been able to recover from those injuries and is being able to be back to 100% in what he was prior to those injuries. If he is, look out for Cory McIntyre Jr. throughout his final years of his WVU career. He's got the chance to be an absolute stud on that defensive line. Now looks like he's healthy. Now looks like he can finally contribute and do what we've expected him to do the first couple of seasons before those injuries hit him. Watch out for Cory McIntyre Jr. on that defensive line. And then we have fellow sophomore Nate Gabriel, 6'3", 295, and he's a true sophomore now because he was one of the very few true freshmen that West Virginia played last season and didn't redshirt. They needed to use Nate Gabriel on the defensive line, and you could not discount that experience. That's very vital as he moves throughout his career now, is getting that experience, and I think that helped him to now, when he's been around in the spring, when he's been around the fall, he's kind of been talked about a lot. This staff really likes him a lot also. They think he's going to be a key player, throughout their future here at WVU, and rightfully so. You don't get to play in 12 games as a true freshman, on the defensive line if you're not talented and if you don't have the right mindset. So he certainly has those. Added depth on the D-line last year, ended up with 9 tackles and an assist on a sack. Played in over 120 defensive snaps, which is pretty impressive for a true freshman there. And so you like what you have for him. That's a guy that probably has a super high ceiling that I think will only continue to be involved this year. And that role is going to just increase over time, not only throughout the year, but throughout his career as well. And Nate Gabriel is going to be a name to keep an eye on as a future stud there playing the middle for West Virginia's defensive line. Which brings us to our freshmen and our redshirt freshmen. Won't spend too much time on these guys because I don't think they'll contribute right away this season, with the exception of maybe one guy, which I'll point out here momentarily. But we got Quinton Goens, redshirt freshman, 6'3", 257, another in-state native that's trying to work his way up to maybe potentially getting some playing time coming from that kind of former walk-on role. Quinton Goens molding himself out throughout his career here at WVU, looking to earn some playing time as he goes along and help the team in any way that he can. Which brings us to our true freshman. We have Wilerson Telmach, 6'6", 255-pound, most likely defensive end here for his true freshman season, which he was here for the spring. That helped him get a leg up. And I think the funny thing that I like to point out here about Wilerson Telmach is he played for Teddy Bridgewater in high school there at Miami Northwestern High, which, funny enough, of course, Teddy Bridgewater, longtime NFL quarterback, former Louisville quarterback in college as well. So funny enough that there's that connection there, but had a good high school career and I think has good potential for the future once he develops into that role. We'll keep an eye on Wilerson Telmach at the defensive end spot. And then you got Brandon Caesar, 6'4", 265, another true freshman that came in early and has been around for a little bit now. He's from Cleveland Heights there in Cleveland, Ohio. Good size coming in there for a true freshman at 6'4", 265. Maybe could develop into something in, sooner rather than later. We'll see how long it takes him to acclimate, but we'll keep an eye on Brandon Caesar on that defensive line as well. And then we have the in-state pickup that was a later addition for West Virginia here, but nonetheless a good true freshman to add in Carter Ziuliani from Bridgeport. And he was a tight end / D-line, didn't know exactly which one he would play. They're going to use him on the D-line at WVU, and he's coming in. I mean, look at that size, 6'6". Can't coach that type of frame. That's just natural height and God-given ability there, and 254 pounds. We'll see how quickly he can adjust to playing here at the power conference level. But, if they can continue to build him up size-wise there. That could be a force there on the defensive front in the future, in his career there. So if he can add some weight to go with that 6'6" frame, I think he has the athleticism from what I've heard. So we'll keep an eye on an in-state prospect and Carter Ziuliani on West Virginia's defensive line. And then lastly, we have to highlight Taylor Brown out of Upper Marlboro, Maryland. Look at the size coming in as a true freshman. 6'3", 290 already as a true freshman. And depending on which recruiting service you look at, he was the highest rated recruit West Virginia brought in this past class here in 2025. So this is the one that I'm keeping an eye on, despite him being a true freshman. Could he be like Nate Gabriel was last season and earn some playing time? I think there's a chance. I'm keeping an eye on Taylor Brown as the one true freshman that may see some action along this defensive line. Highly regarded, coming out a 4-star prospect according to 247 Sports. They had him as the number 16 defensive lineman in the country, a top 5 player in the state of Maryland, and nearly a top 100 player nationally as well. So that shows you how highly regarded that he was coming out of high school and why I think that he could be one of the true freshmen that contributes early. Remember the name, Taylor Brown, moving through the future here on WVU's defensive line. With that being said, let's talk who we're going to see this year. Let's talk projected pecking order. All right, so I figured the easiest way to do this would be similar to how I did the offensive line. Let's break it down to the positions on the defensive line, and I'll give you 3 guys that I think will be a contributor, because that's then, 9 total defensive linemen. That's a pretty good defensive line rotation. I'm sure they'd like to have 10 or more, and then there are some other names that I think could contribute that aren't on this list that we talked about there, but this is the way I see it currently. So defensive end, of course, we have a caveat. If Jamory Robinson isn't able to go, this could shift things a little bit, because I think if Jamory Robinson isn't eligible, then maybe you make Eddie Kelly play D end and you go Eddie Kelly, Hammond Russell, and Eddie V along the D line. I think you want to have kind of your best guys. I think Eddie Kelly is one of your best that probably needs to start. If Jamory's around and you have both of them together, that's even better. So this is kind of the ideal scenario here. So D end, obviously Jamory Robinson is going to be the main guy there if he's eligible. Then you have Devin Grant and Adam Tomch, and then potentially Eddie Kelly as well, who I think could play D end or D tackle. But that's the 3 I see for the D end pecking order right now. Nose tackle, I see Hammond Russell as your number 1. I see Nate Gabriel not far behind him at all, maybe even competes. And then Cory McIntyre Jr. as well, who we've been a huge fan of. He's going to get on the field this season, and we're going to finally get to see his game. That's the way I see it at nose tackle. And then at D tackle, I think Eddie Kelly, slightly above Eddie V, but either one of those guys can get, the starting job there and get the majority of the reps. Both of those are really talented players. And then Asani Redwood, who we talked about as well. So I think when you look at these 9 names right here, these are guys that, are going to be solid contributors this upcoming season. That's not even including some other guys that I think will get some reps when you talk about, we mentioned Taylor Brown, we mentioned Elijah Simmons potentially getting on the field. So, there's a couple other names right there. So I think you could easily see 10 plus D linemen kind of be involved here for West Virginia. But I think that these are probably your top 9 right now, which could shift a little bit depending on Jamory Robinson's status. But that's the way I see it. There's my projected pecking order. Say that 5 times fast as we get set to wrap up our defensive line preview and our position preview series here before we start the 2025 season and the Rich Rod 2.0 era. But that's just the way I see it. Would love to hear your opinion as well. If you have it shaken out another way on the defensive line, let me know there in the comments. I always appreciate those interactions as we continue to try and grow the CRW community throughout Mountaineer Nation. Having said that, until next time, let's go Mountaineers.